IP, or if it's not a comic book, if it's not something that people know. And for a young kid arriving in the business and saying, getting what you got, it's impossible. So what could the George Lucas of today do to make the Star Wars of today?
Well, you know, it was impossible to do it then, really. I mean, to ask, the only way I managed to get a lot of the deal, which again, there was no money in licensing. And the studio didn't have a licensing department. It was just like, oh, we don't do that. Maybe Planet of the Apes because it's a TV series, and so we can do that. But there was no money in it. It was just like, oh, well, it's kind of, we do it. But that's the thing that is like, it didn't mean anything to them. And the sequel rights, their attitude was, we don't like this movie, it's really terrible, and it's stupid. So what do we care about the sequel rights? Because the studio's going to get sold anyway. So we won't take the blame for any of this, and even that, it won't go anywhere. They had no faith in it whatsoever. And as I say, even when the stockholders, the board of directors saw it, they said, this is terrible, let's sell it. And so part of it was I had a script and a thing that nobody wanted, and I had a couple of people who were my champions, which was Laddie and Ashley Boone and people. It's like, so they didn't care. They just said, well, this isn't worth anything. There is no licensing, not in a movie. He'll never get that license for anything. Except maybe t-shirts and posters, which, with that, he'll make maybe $20,000. So that's the deal. But I knew when I did, I said, even with American Graffiti, I said, there was another one of those in American Graffiti, which is when we started to finish the movie, we went to Universal and we said, and we were buying the rights to all, there's 70 songs in that movie, pop songs. And they said, we said, for another $3,000 a song, we can get the album rights to all the songs in the movie. They said, we don't want those, we don't want those, we don't want those. So when the movie came out, it was a giant, huge hit. They went out and spent like $2 or $3 million just to get the rights for the album. And then they did 2 albums. It's like, that was Hollywood then. I don't really know, I've been retired for 10 years. I'm not sure what it's like now. But, they weren't they didn't really understand the business the way somebody who's on the ground does. And the people on the ground, director, writer, if you say, I'm going to make this movie no matter what, and people have done it, you can actually do it. And now there are a lot more with streaming. It's very easy. It was easy. Now it's not. They shut it down. But it was that they were throwing money around like crazy. And so if you had a crazy movie and you could say, well, I can make this into 4 movies, you can pretty much get a deal. But now they're, backed off. So it's not quite as easy as it was. But the secret to the whole thing, ultimately, is persistence, which was in the movie. It's the only, and I battled it for 2 or 3 years, 4 years for each movie. I just kept pushing, and not giving up because I was passionate about the film. And I didn't really care about the deal. I just cared about getting to make the movie. It was from film school. All we did was, our passion was to make the movie. We didn't care. And we were hoping that somebody wouldn't figure out the secret, which is for film students and young people's right. You'll pay to make the movie. I'll pay you all I've got, $300. Or I'll do it for free, which is also a thing like with Jim Cameron, who I became friends with, who, when he did Titanic and went over, he had 50% of that. And but it was going over budget, way and over time, and he finally said, look, I'll do this film, but I will give up my percentage, which they can't, if you're going to give them something, they can't resist it. He said, I'll give you all my percentage. And he did the same thing on the next film that he did. And he said, you're crazy. What are you doing? This is nuts. He said, but I want to make my movie. I want to make my movie. I said, you know, it's not going to make any difference to them. I mean, yes, they're not going to shut it down. I said, you know, there's a secret to making movies. If you're halfway through and you've spent a ton of money, and they did the Star Wars, they cut me off because they said, it was, you know, Fox was going out of business. I said, you've got to finish in 3 weeks. I mean, I was 1 week over. And they said, well, you can't go over anymore. I said, but I still have the whole opening of the film. When Darth Vader arrives with Princess Leia, it sets up the plot. This is all, you have to have this. You can't start without that. And they said, well, you know, you gotta stop. And so I said, you know, I can get that shot, but I'm gonna have to work 24 hours a day with 3 new crews, and it's gonna cost you a lot more than if you just let me go the 3 weeks instead of cutting it up at 1 week. And so I said, you know, they said, look, just stop when we say, because what they wanted to do is the announcement in the trades that said Star Wars is finished, and they finished shooting. That's an important thing for them. It doesn't mean anything because I did get all these crews, and it did cost them. You know, Star Wars, the budget, the original budget, which was, you know, what it actually costs, just like building a building. You say, well, this is the lumber, these are the people, they're going to work this many weeks, and this is how much they get paid, and you come up with a real budget. They're not used to that. They're used to producers just scamming them and putting a number out there. And I said, this isn't like that. This is a real cost. And as a result, what happened is, when I gave them the budget was $13 million, they said, it's got to be under 10. And I said, I can't do it for under 10. I said, you know, I'm not going to cut stuff out of the script. And they said, well, look, just make the movie. That was Laddie. He said, we'll figure that out. So it came out, and it was $13 million. And so they were really excited about the fact that it was, you know, 10 days over or 2 weeks over from what they expected, which, you know, it was just, they didn't understand that that isn't a way you save money by just cutting it off. You don't get a movie, you know, it's just, that world, I'm not sure if it still exists, but it kind of still exists, meaning it's impossible, and you just have to have the passion and the persistence to continue to do what you need to do to get the movie made the way you want it. Now, I'm famous